Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Kelvin, for that incredibly warm introduction. And us Middlesex folks got to stick together. Where's the guy from Old Bridge? Right? Somebody here's from Old Bridge. That's right. Yeah, but you're a Republican. Yeah, but he's a Republican, so not a bad guy anyway. So thanks everybody for having me here tonight. What a true treat it is to be here and to be with all of you this evening in this really lovely setting. I want to take a couple seconds just to thank my colleagues who came to see me. Senator, I have a hard time saying, John Bramnick, who I served with for a long time in the assembly. But John and Paul and Dan, Heather was here, and Dan and Dave Bailey, and a dear friend, Adam Telefaro, who I had the privilege of serving with when he served in the assembly as well. Adam, thank you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for coming out. It's a beautiful night. It would be a great night to be outside doing something a lot more fun than listening to me, and yet you chose to be here. And I really do thank you. And I want to thank you, Ben, for having me here. Thank you for the award I got last year. I'm available for awards whenever you do, or if somebody just can't show up. I'm not particular. I'll just sell it out the plate. And I want to commend all of the students and the faculty here for your passion and your commitment and dedication to service. I think public service is one of those things that allows people to do an awful lot of good things for the people that the towns they live in, or the state they live in, or the country that they live in, or the world that they live in. And it often gets overlooked and sometimes taken for granted. But I can tell you, having lived many years and having been around people who have been committed to public service, that it is incredibly rewarding, and you will feel really good about yourself. Now, you won't be able to retire at 35 with your own airplane like some of your friends who became hedge fund folk, but you'll have a profoundly deeper impact on the world at large, and you'll do something really, really good. So to all of you, thank you for that, and thank you for being here this evening. You particularly could have been someplace a lot more fun than being here listening to me. And I do want to admire the RIPAC for the work that they do, for the internships that they help sponsor. Ben was talking to me, and I had a chance to speak to these fine young people about what they're going to do over the summer. Everybody had an internship, and everybody had the opportunity to build on their career. And my experience is on a personal level. I have three. I call them kids, but they're kids only to my wife and me. They're like 34 and 28, 32. But all of them have started off by having an internship in their chosen field. And that has paid dividends, of course. And I want to especially thank you for including in your caption and giving a top billing the notion of citizenship. I think that is something that really is different and something that I think will serve you all well if you just keep that in mind as you go through your time in public service. Being a good citizen means more than just the common definition of that. It means different things to everyone, but it always has a special meaning and opportunity. For me, the definition of citizenship includes being compassionate, serving other people. For scholars like you, it may mean that you're maintaining your focus on what's going to impact the 9.3 million New Jerseyans who call our state home, and whether what the public policy does helps or hinders that. Now, I'm going to give you a little tip. It could be a little bit challenging, the notion of building in compassion with the 9.3 million spirited New Jerseyans, all of whom have an opinion, most of whom will tell you vociferously and loudly what that opinion is, and we are not going to be shy about telling you when you're wrong. But the truth of the matter is the mission here at RIPAC to inform, to engage, to train students and faculty and the public in both policy and politics and citizenship is really noble. And so congratulations on that. That's a fine thing to include as at the top of your list. Now, in the 5 years that RIPAC has been around, you already have become an important institution in the state of New Jersey. And I don't need to look further than the group of people assembled in front of me to know that that's something that's going to continue in the years to come. You're going to be a powerful force in the state of New Jersey for generations to come. They'll rely on you for what you learn here, and it will help you. You will help shape the days ahead. The state of New Jersey. You're going to write the next chapter, and you'll be experts, advocates, activists, legislators, political leaders, just like Assemblyman Moen, who was a Rowan student, along with Senator Singleton, both of whom sat in the same seats that you're sitting in. Now, we're talking about the future, and so I think it's important to remember that a bright future is built on a strong foundation. And for me, it's been an honor to serve my community in the Assembly and to be entrusted by my colleagues to serve as the Speaker. I'm very proud of our state record, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done. I'm a shameless cheerleader. I'm all in for New Jersey every time I can. I think it's the best place in the world to live. I can't imagine living anywhere else, and we should be really, really proud of it. Now, we're not the only people who recognize that. When you compare us to other states, I have to tell you, we're really pretty special. We're routinely voted the best place to live, the best place to raise a family. We have one of the lowest gun violence rates in the country by orders of magnitude. We just have raised our business climate ranking in the last CNBC poll by about 29 places. Now imagine how the kids at Rutgers would feel if they were ranked 19th, right? And we were just recently ranked the most fun state to be in. I can't think of a better honor than that. In fact, we're doing so well, I feel bad for the other states. Well, a little bit bad for the other states. We have made tremendous progress, and we are continuing to do that, but there's still much more that we can achieve. We need to be able to further expand our opportunities for our neighbors to do great things, to raise their families in safe, welcoming, affordable towns with the best public schools in the country. Who went to public school here besides me? See that? Look at how good our public schools is. Year in, year out, we're 1, 2, or 3. Best public school system in the country, bar none. We should be really proud of that. We invest very heavily in that. Property taxes, almost every property tax bill is about 60%, I guess, or so on average in every community. We invest billions of dollars. You know how many? 48% of the state's $55 billion budget is going to go property tax relief. Most of it in the form of education aid. Some of it for property tax relief. And we want to give people the opportunity to continue to do that, to continue to grow and to stay here in New Jersey. I'm really proud of you who are from New Jersey who stayed in here. We export more college students than any state in the country. That's because we have the best high school students and because they're really talented. And you have the pick of where you can go to school. And we have an affluent state, so parents can help afford to pay for that. But mostly it's because of you, because you did well in school and you came from a school where other states recognize that, hey, this kid's from Jersey, this kid's pretty smart, right? So you stayed here, and I admire that, and I appreciate that. We need to be able to keep you here because we're developing an innovation economy that's going to serve us all in the years to come. We're going to figure out how to manage AI to do the best that's best for the state and for the people who live here and for the world. We have the opportunity to do that. We also want to give people the opportunity to retire here with dignity and to stay in the communities that they love, near the family that they love, and in the communities that they've built. I'm really lucky now. I have 2 incredible, amazing, perfect, wonderful, special, charming, lovely grandkids. 14 months and 12 months. And if you got an extra hour, you don't feel like going outside, sit down, I'll show you pictures, we've got videos, the whole 9 yards. Truth of the matter is that's one of the things that we had best going for us in the state of New Jersey, grandkids, because nobody wants to leave them. I'm telling you that it lives up to its billing. And so we need to make sure that the people who want to stay here in New Jersey can afford to stay here in New Jersey and to go on to do the things that they do, because seniors contribute in so many ways. I do a lot of things around food insecurity, and if you go to a food pantry, you're likely to see a lot of volunteers, many of whom are seniors. If you go to the library and you look for volunteers, many of whom are seniors. They participate in their community in any number of ways. And so making sure that they have the opportunity to retire here with dignity and involved in their families is something that's truly important to us. But to do all of these things, find jobs, keep kids here, stick up for seniors, we do them all while enjoying the fundamental freedoms which are sadly under attack in so many other places across this country. Now, for me, at the very heart of all of our aspirational goals is the basic dignity, is that basic dignity of all people have to be accorded to everyone, each and every citizen in the state of New Jersey. We're a great state, but you can't call yourself a great state if you don't live up to your potential by making sure that all of your fellow New Jerseyans have a few things. I think they're the four pillars. You have to make sure that everybody has something to eat. You have to make sure that they have a place to live and have a roof over their head. I think you have to make sure that people have the medical care that they need when they need it. And we have to give people not above all, but certainly aspirationally, we have to give everybody opportunity. And I think opportunity is education and employment. We have to do those things. And we do. We do. They're not just governmental functions. In fact, they're not charity. They're closer to a moral obligation. But beyond that, it's really good for all of us. If we do those things, if every citizen has the opportunity to take advantage of their best talents and to contribute to their communities, we're all better off. Now, I was joking about some of those other states before, and we really do make them look bad. But honestly, when you look at some of their policies and decisions that they've made, you can understand why they're bad. Across the country, it's just mind-boggling sometimes. There are situations where state governments intentionally leave the most vulnerable to suffer, even when they're a viable option. It's just unconscionable. I'll give you an example. We've expanded eligibility for free school meals to cover kids throughout our state. It's imperative in our fight against food insecurity and against hunger, which would have been, as you know, one of the closest issues to my heart. We all know that kids do better with nutritious meals, and we simply should not be willing to abide hungry children in our state. In addition to that, this summer, we're going to partner with the federal government to provide what are called EBT cards. And what they are is to make sure that kids get healthy meals when school is not in session, which is one of the real challenges that we face. Now, there's a minimal cost to that to the state, but it's almost entirely funded by the feds. Obviously, we're going to take advantage of that. But 15 states have decided to turn down the money, denying the nourishment to millions of children. I don't understand. And I don't really want to ever wish anybody well, but I sure as heck hope they don't sleep well tonight or any night until they figure that out. Why don't they do it? Well, buzzword, ignorance, prize of big government and welfare. I really do hope they can't sleep tonight. The same story can be told for so many of them regarding health care, housing, and education. We have to make choices in accordance with our values, and we have to be resolute in the question of human dignity. My vision for the future of the state starts there. President Biden has a line that I'm quite fond of, and so I steal it at every chance I get, just like I weave in that I've been to the White House a couple of times, because your kid growing up in South Amboy gets invited to the White House. You got to tell everybody, right? Who would believe it otherwise? Did I mention I was at the White House? Yeah, I was there for St. Patrick's Day, too. How about that? What the president says is, don't tell me your values. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what your values are. And I think that's really my first year as the Speaker, and then Senate President Sweeney and the newly inaugurated Governor Murphy, we started down a path that seemed somewhat revolutionary at the time. You know what we did? We decided to pay our bills. That was something that wasn't always done. And in the 6+ years that have followed, we've gone from fiscal crisis to big surplus. Now, you will hear people criticizing how our spending went up, but let me give you an example of what some of that spending is about. If we, as you may know, for decades, both Democrat and Republican administrations didn't make full pension contributions. They would skip it. They would cheat on it. They would not pay it, or they'd pay a portion of it. Our current budget payment is over $7 billion this year, in this year's budget. We're going to make a full pension. If everybody had done their job, our pension payment, I'm told, would be $1.6 billion. Something like $6 billion wouldn't have had to have been spent if people had just paid the bill. I think it's a pretty simple concept, and so did Steve, and so did the governor. But we've gone from shirking our responsibilities to meeting our commitments. And we've committed to fully fund the pension after it's been shortchanged for for decades. Like I said, the other problem with that is when you do that, when you shortchange the pension fund, you jeopardize the security retirement for hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans. Like I said, when I began as the speaker, we hadn't made a full pension fund in more than 2 decades. This year, for the 4th time in a row, we're going to make a full pension. That makes a difference. Now, I know you guys aren't thinking about your pension yet, but maybe your parents are or your grandparents are, and your future will depend on that. The more that we owe, the bigger the structural debt comes. The more it steals from what we could be spending on. Think of if we had that $6 billion. We could either not spend it, my Republican friends might argue, or they'd be wrong, or we could spend it on other kinds of good things to help the people of New Jersey. But we wouldn't have to spend it because we didn't do our job and we didn't pay our bill. We've also ramped up school funding to the highest level in state history, and finally in compliance with the school funding formula. Now, for every dollar that we spent, when I was first elected to the speaker, we spend $1.48, nearly 1.5 times as much on public education. Make sure that we're continuing to provide the quality education that we need. We've increased our investments in infrastructure after decades of gimmicks because we had to do this if we wanted to build a brighter future for the state. I believe that common sense has to be part of every decision, and that getting things done is what really matters, not just getting a headline. That often means working with others, sometimes with people you disagree with. It means working with stakeholders and experts and devising the best way forward. I think we've done that really well. Having gotten our fiscal house in order, we were able now to invest in the future and set priorities in accordance with our values. Speaking of our values, I'm proud. I'm as proud as hell that the NRA is suing the state of New Jersey because of a law that I helped champion and pass. We don't need guns at college sporting events or at the Jersey Shore. The notion of some guy in a Speedo with his 9mm is wrong on so incredibly many levels. And when the U.S. Supreme Court struck down some of our concealed carry laws, we got to work to make sure that the people of New Jersey are safe from gun violence. And we have a great record. We've stepped up to the plate in the fight against climate change, and we're doing so in a way to help create an industry that will sustain generations of good-paying union jobs created through the clean wind energy, and we've also passed the strongest environmental justice law in the country. Because living in a poor neighborhood shouldn't mean that you have to breathe in toxic fumes all day long. We've supported organized labor. And across the country, we're seeing a resurgence of unions, with workers giving voice to their cause and helping their families. We've passed the strongest equal pay law. When I became the speaker in 2018, the first bill we did was the equal pay law. Because as preposterous as it sounds, in 2018, we didn't have a law that said women have to get paid the same as men. Preposterous and insulting, yet we did. We've ensured that workers now have access to sick leave, so that they can stay at home and care for their newborn. And family leave, so they can stay home with newborns and sick parents, sick family members. It makes the quality of life better. It takes the burden off. That's what our job is as government. Figure out the way to help people in a way that makes their lives better in any number of ways. Now, we all benefit in one way or another. I like to say that when the Coughlin kids came down the stairs on Christmas morning, everybody had what they needed. It wasn't identical piles. Everybody got a bike, not at the same time. But everybody had what. I think that applies to government too. Stand up for everybody. Figure out what they need. Help make their lives better and help them to move forward. We've been able to ease the burden on homeowners and renters as well through tax relief programs that are the largest in state history, in Anchor and Stay NJ, which is coming in 18 months. We've planned to roll that out, and that is a plan that's designed to cut senior property taxes in half. Now, where's my friend Mark? I know I talked to him before, and I disagree with the experts here at the Sweeney Center who are critical of Stay NJ. But I'm here to tell you tonight, Stay NJ will be implemented, and Stay NJ will be here to stay. Because there's not going to be 41 in the Assembly, and 21 in the Senate who are ever going to vote against it once it gets started. They can, but it'll be their last term. Almost every senior citizen in this state will benefit from that program. And it's good for seniors. As I said, they contribute so much to our state. But it's also transformative because people make their decisions about where they're going to live their retirement years, not when they're 65, but when they're 55, or as they get closer to retirement. And so they'll look at New Jersey in a better way. It'll also do something else. It'll help keep houses in family and allow them to be passed on to the next generation, which will create something which is incredibly important, generational wealth. Having a home, being able to have that kind of resource is something that will make a profound difference in people's lives going forward. For you guys, for the college students here, we enacted the College Affordability Act. You remember it, right? Everybody's read it, studied it, talked about it. I know. In fact, all of you have asked me questions about the College Affordability Act. No, you didn't. But that's okay. Trust me, we did it, and we passed it. And it's designed to help students and their families pay for college, save for college, and get rid of student loans. We've set the stage for our state to thrive. And that's paying dividends to New Jerseyans from childhood to retirement. The future of New Jersey needs to stay that course. We have to ensure that we keep making those strategic investments that comport with our values. My signature issue in Trenton has been fighting food insecurity, as Coven so kindly pointed out. We have expanded eligibility for free breakfast and lunch to over 70,000 kids in the last couple of months for K through 12, both public and private, because a hungry kid is a hungry kid. We should try to fight to eliminate that. We have the first and only statewide food insecurity advocate, coordinates things from top to bottom in the nation. We've established programs to build supermarkets and food deserts. We've invested, part of our incentive program is designed to do just that. We have an $11 billion program to attract people to the state of New Jersey, to come and build and to develop their businesses here and to keep them here. Part of that, and I think this is unique to New Jersey, is designed to prevent and eliminate food deserts. We have them throughout the state. We've also raised the minimum wage for SNAP, which benefits families throughout the state. Underutilized. So if you need somebody, you know somebody who's hungry, tell them to get their SNAP benefits. They've earned it. They're entitled to it. Do it. There was a cliff that was coming. The federal government had some supplemental funding during the pandemic, and that went away in March. We're the only state in the country that didn't let that gap, that cliff, have people fall off that cliff here in the state of New Jersey. We raised it to the highest level in the nation, the minimum benefits, because I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that the $23 minimum that is the federal limit is enough to feed a family for a month. My next mission is to take on poverty. We've already raised the minimum wage, and we're going to continue to find other ways. Let's make sure that New Jerseyans have access to high-quality schools, safe housing, proper medical care, behavioral and mental health support. Kevin, I thank you for pushing that out. It is a real challenge to us, and is the root cause of so many other things that are not good for our state. Despite all of this and the incredible progress that we've made, things that other states I think of generally in aspirational terms, and I can tell you that because did I mention I was invited to the White House? Yeah, I was invited to the White House. The president was kind enough to invite me to the White House to talk about food insecurity about a year and a half ago. And the things that other states talk about in terms of their fight against hunger are things that they talk about them in aspirational terms. We talk about them as being in the rearview mirror. We also have to stand up in unwavering defense of the freedoms that many of us had thought would never go away, and we took them for granted. Our country has gone through some tumult before. We've always come out stronger. So now it's our turn to lead it through. Because it's not just the tone of the discourse over the past several years that has changed. The very character of our country and our democracy itself are in peril. The Dobbs decision undid 50 years of precedent and fundamental freedom for women to make their choices about their own body. Just today, Trenton, we passed a resolution to go on record to oppose Arizona's resurrection of, listen to this, imagine this, a law from 1864 to ban all abortion, even in the case of rape or incest. Let me put that in perspective. Today is April 15th. It is the 159th anniversary of President Lincoln's dying after having been shot. The Arizona Supreme Court just upheld a law that will decide health care decisions for women that was written the year before that. We have to stand up and say this is wrong. And voting rights are also something that we have given much attention to, and so many have given their lives over the course of history to make sure that they had it. Here in New Jersey, I think we've done a good job. We've made it easier to get ballots to vote through the mail. We've increased voting by adding early voting. And we passed laws, and this was on a bipartisan basis, which is something I think we didn't get enough credit for. John DeMaio, the minority leader, and I passed a bill to make sure that election night reporting was more understandable and transparent, which was something I think at the time, we did it years ago, something I think was remarkable in the country at this time. The Democrat and the Republican coming together to say, we want you to believe in fair and safe and true, honest and elections, and that it's important that you do. And so we're going to come together and make sure that you do. We're going to do what we can to say to everybody, look, pay attention. This is good. It's safe. You can do it. And we did. So now we have another challenge, though. We still don't get enough people to the poll. And I'm looking at, not you, but your friend. Too many young people simply do not vote. Imagine the power that you would have if you did. I'm going to tell you, and all of you know, many of you have worked on campaigns or you work for legislative offices, you've been around the political process. You know we pay attention to who's voting, right? If you work on a campaign, you know what a 4x4 is. That means it's somebody who's voted in the last 4 elections every time. Those people get all the attention because we know they're going to go to the poll. It gives you power and influence if you do. So make sure, I'm guarantee everybody here vote. Make sure you get your friends to the polls. Even if they're not going to vote for me, well, maybe not. But if they're not going to vote for me, it's okay. Make sure they get out and vote. It's important. It's the way democracy stands up for itself. Think of it this way. People die in other places to be able to vote. And we just say, something else. It was too busy. It was raining. It was whatever. Make sure we do. Let's get out there. Now, sadly, in our nation today, there are old hatreds and anger has been stirred, stoked, xenophobia, racism, sexism. Many of us didn't think that was possible in our country for it to wind up this place. But the Trump presidency and ramifications have shattered that illusion. So let's make sure we stand up for ourselves. Let me leave you with this thought. Part of what it means to be a student and to want to be involved in public policy is to dream big, to think about the world around you and to think about how you can make a change. We take that spirit with us to Trenton. Let me give you an example. One day last month, we voted on 3 bills. The first was one to make positive changes for the next decade that will mean 100,000 affordable housing units will be built in the state of New Jersey. That means 100,000 families with a safe, affordable home or apartment. Students like yourselves dreaming of a future here in New Jersey and having the freedom to live in the town you want to live in. It's about low and middle-income families having the ability to live in the district with the best school system in the state and give every kid the opportunity to have access to that great public school system, regardless of how much money their parents make. It's an opportunity for a custodian at the best high school in the state to send his or her child to their school. On that very same day, we reauthorized the state's Transportation Trust Fund, which will create more than 21,000 good-paying union jobs every year for the next 5 years, and will lead to $33.5 billion of economic. In a state like New Jersey, our transportation infrastructure is vital to the functioning of our economy, and we'll improve that over the next 5 years. We also took a stand against some of the extreme elements of attacking freedoms in our country. When the Alabama State Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos are children, they made a dangerous ruling to restrict the freedoms of people who want to make their own decisions about how and when to start a family. When we looked at it, we recognized it wasn't some fringe element, that in fact about half of the Republicans in Congress were sponsored to bill to do just the same thing. We thought that the people of New Jersey deserved to know where their representatives stood on that issue, and so we voted on a resolution condemning that in the strongest language. That was all in one day, Brenton. Because we weren't afraid to tackle big issues, because we wanted to dream big, and we wanted to do the right thing for the people of New Jersey. To all of you who are here, who want to be involved, keep dreaming big. Keep wanting to make a change, make the world a better place. You have the talent, you'll have the opportunity, and you can do it. Work hard, make sure that your dreams come true. Never give up. You may have to compromise, but never compromise your core values. All that you learn, take it with you. Make the world a better place. Thank you for letting me be with you tonight. It's been a real privilege. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
I only do easy questions on Monday, just for the record.
All softballs for somebody like you, sir. Don't worry about it. We had any number of people who registered online. When they registered, we offered you an opportunity, excuse me, to what question they wanted to see asked. And we tried to coalesce them. Several were very similar. But we had a bunch of them talking about growing the economy. Mm-hmm. It remains a major concern for people in the audience. So starting off with this, what kinds of steps are needed to grow New Jersey's economy?
Well, I think you have to do a few things, right? You have to, first of all, identify areas where you have where you can really attract new and growing businesses to our state. I'll give you one area that's been truly successful for us. We had a film tax credit program. You see Senator Moriarty smiling. He's a big supporter. In fact, wasn't it your bill? I think it was your bill. Yeah. And that has been hugely successful. There's one that's going on the base. Netflix is building a huge facility down at the base, which will be multi-billion-dollar project when it's all done. But it's not just there. There's a place in Carteret. There's the biggest production studio in the world is going to be in Bayonne. So identify those things. Be committed to making sure they do. Understand. Look, we often, as Democrats, get criticized for not working with business, but understanding how to develop a program, and I talked about that $11 billion incentive program that we initiated, which is designed to keep people in New Jersey as well as to attract them to New Jersey. So recognize the unique circumstances that you have. New Jersey is incredibly strategic, located between New York and Philadelphia, right? Best highways in the country. That's why we invested again in that transportation trust fund. Identify places where you can be successful and then go after them zealously. There's a Helix project in New Brunswick. It's going to be transformative and will help attract innovation, the innovation industry to the state of New Jersey. Then make sure you have a place for people that they can afford to live, and that's why we're trying to make New Jersey affordable. Make sure that they have a good, make sure they have a workforce that is educated and understanding, and then give them the other things that attract people to place. If I were the governor and I were trying to attract a CEO to the state of New Jersey, one of the things I'd tell them was, look, you're going to be able to send your child to some of the best schools in the country for nothing. The public schools are there. Now your property taxes are going to be what the property taxes are, but you're not going to have to invest and send your kid to a private school because you want them to get a decent education. Everybody in New Jersey can do that. So all of those things, a welcoming economy, a place that respects the freedoms, all the things that I talked about go together in attracting people to the state of New Jersey. It's not simple. It's not monolithic.
So just as a follow-up to that, one of the things that Democrats who have continued to control the state legislature, both houses,
As well they should.
have worked closely with their Democratic governor over the last number of years on a lot of these issues. But are there areas where you differ with Governor Murphy about how to manage and grow New Jersey's economy?
Well, so, excuse me, over the course of the 6.5 years that we've been, or 6+ years that we've been together, we've built a very strong working relationship with the governor. There were times, early on in his tenure, I resisted the notion of the millionaire's tax. Ultimately, we came to a place where we could get to that point. I think we need to be mindful about how we attract and how zealously we go, recognizing some of the challenges. And what I'm talking about, like, for example, is I know the governor has his program requires all electric vehicles by 2035. I think that we need to be flexible in going to that. I think that we have an obligation to stick up for the planet, and we're doing that. We're doing it by investing in wind very heavily. But as we go through the process, we need to be able to adjust. Now, I don't know if we have the luxury of that. I read in a paper just the other day that the UN had a conference and said that we have probably 2 years to act if we're going to save the planet. Now, that's a little bit of a misnomer. The planet's going to be here. The rock will be fine. It's the people we have to really worry about. So, but constantly evaluating those kind of decisions and policies, recognizing that the world changes and evolves and things are different one year to another. I don't know if that's a disagreement with the governor. I think he would probably say much of the same thing. But when you set the policy, you have to make it with some end date because it's got to be real.
I want to raise the issue. We had a couple questions about the line.
What line?
The line.
Oh,
the big issue of the moment in New Jersey politics is about the line, the grouping of those candidates who've been endorsed by a county party organization on a ballot in a primary election so that all the endorsed names are listed in one column. This case is currently making its way through the federal courts right now. On one hand, you have those advocating the First Amendment protects the ability to do this, freedom of association. Others are arguing the 14th Amendment, the equal protection. So all of this is at stake. You and other legislative leaders have been suggesting that this issue should be resolved by the legislature, the political process. It's entirely unclear whether that's actually going to get to happen. So you're a lawyer, a politician, a party leader. When it comes to the line, what do you want to see as the final outcome?
Well, what I want to see is a system that recognizes people's right to association and it is constitutional, as simply put. The truth of the matter is this is a legislative obligation and responsibility. I wasn't around in the legislature when we created the last law, but here's the way it works. And I got this when I was, and I repeat this often, Dan Hutchinson's heard me say it 5 times already. He's been there 4 months. When I got to the legislature, the OLS, you'd have a training session, and they taught us, how you go around the building and how you get a law filed or a bill filed and all of those things. I think probably the most important thing they told me was there were 9 million people in the state of New Jersey then. They said there's 9 million people in the state of New Jersey, and 121 of them get to make the rules. And you're one of them, which was incredibly profound and really gives you goosebumps. But the truth of the matter is that's our job, right? It is our job to figure out what ballot construction ought to look like. It's our job to figure out how we go about protecting the rights of people who want to associate. I don't really think it's in dispute that people have the right to associate. But how do we do that in a way that is constitutional? That's where the judge comes in. We get to make the rule. The governor gets to sign or not sign the rule. And if we get a bill passed, then the courts will decide if it's constitutional. It's not their job to decide what our ballots look like. In fact, there's ballots throughout the country that do recognize in one way or another association with other candidates. So we will go to work on that. I've already had meetings, and I can say this, and I say it proudly, it's a bipartisan notion that we should do that. The press release that you're referring to, I think, Ben, is one we had sent out. It was signed by the Senate President, the Senate Minority Leader, and the Assembly Minority Leader, as well as myself, because we do recognize this is something we're going to have to undertake. I do believe it will get done. We will get a bill done. I suspect it'll be rapidly challenged unless it's because somebody won't like it. But the truth of the matter is that's what I think the solution is. What the courts will tell us will be beneficial in helping us see, understanding the challenges that we face and in helping us to craft that ballot format.
Both sides of the aisle seem to be focused on affordability. This has become a buzzword in Trenton. And towards this end, you have been a lead sponsor and outspoken defender of targeted property tax rebates, such as the Anchor program, and particularly Stay NJ, which was your initiative. However, there are others who believe that these expensive programs only mask the larger problem. They advocate for a more fundamental tax reform. Do you believe that New Jersey needs fundamental tax reform? And if so, what would that look like?
Well, I'm in favor of the targeted ones, remember? Yeah.
So is there anything that you'd want to go
Well, here's the truth of that, right? Sure, of course, we could always use fundamental reform. We can always consider all of the options about how we do that. We can always look to find out a way that's better. But if anybody's going to be honest, and they're going to say we need to reduce our taxes from where we're at right now, tell them, what are you going to ask them the question of what they're going to cut? How are they going to pay for the things that we have now? We have thousands of programs that provide an incredible amount of support to people, from autism relief services to drug rehabilitation to people with virtually every kind of disease have some support group, which is what we ought to do as a society, right? When we decide to invest heavily in mental health, it doesn't come from nowhere. We have to make a choice. So we made those choices, and we work hard to target those taxes. I think to target the tax relief. I think we're going to be able to sustain them, and that's the counter to that. Everybody voted. Even my Republican colleagues voted in favor of the bill. Maybe not all. I think one person did. Voted in favor of the bill to create the state program. Now, when it came to the budget and there was $100 million in it to help start funding it, they didn't vote for that because they were okay with going out to dinner. They just weren't okay with paying the bill. So I think that we should always look for ways to cut property tax. Making New Jersey more affordable is one of those things that I think is critical. It's critical in attracting businesses. It's critical in terms of growing our economy. It's critical in terms of making sure that we continue to have the best schools in the country. It's critical in making sure that seniors continue to stay. But if you're going to do that, you have to have an honest conversation about what you're, unless you're going to magically find a new source of revenue that doesn't constitute a tax, how are we going to do it? So I think constantly look for new ways to do it, better ways to do anything. But for now, I'm confident that giving targeted tax relief is something that makes sense, is good for New Jersey, and is good for the people in New Jersey.
As was mentioned in the student's introduction, you are now the longest-serving speaker in state history. What do you enjoy most about being speaker, and what do you enjoy least?
Well, coming to Rowan, of course.
I'm sorry, which one is that?
What do I enjoy most? Well, I think what I enjoy most is getting to do what I do. And when I say that, I mean that in its totality. What I get to do is remarkable. What I get to do is matter in issues that a little kid growing up as a paper boy in South Amboy, I never thought I would get to do. What I get to do is talk to brilliant people from throughout the state who have great ideas about how to make the state better. And I get to meet with them on a regular basis. And by the way, they take my phone call when I call. What I get to do is I get to work with brilliant people like Paul and John and Dan. And where's John? I thought he was next to you. Sorry, he left. Verzicelli snuck out. People like that, my colleagues in the legislature. I get to meet people and talk to people. I love meeting people. I love people. That's my fundamental starting point for everything. I truly enjoy talking to people and meeting them, and I get to do that. My least favorite thing, I guess, is telling people no. The challenge about my job is I often have to tell people with great ideas that we just can't do it because it costs too much or because I can't rally enough support for it. You know, in the legislature, you have to get 41 votes in the Senate. 41 votes in the Assembly, 21 votes in the Senate, and the governor's signature every time. Sometimes that's not doable. Telling people who work really hard, who care an awful lot, who know that in their heart that they're doing something that they believe will make something better, and having to tell them that we just can't do that. That's probably the crappiest part. The real challenging part that is then you'd have to get them to vote for you again for speaker. That's really hard.
As a follow-up, because we can talk about all of the wonderful things about being speaker, just between us.
Yeah, between us kids, yeah. Nobody's listening.
Just between us, might you want to share any potential intentions you might have about seeking a different elected office?
Well, I'm flattered that you would ask. The notion of running for governor is something that has come up, and it is something that I have yet to decide. It's incredibly flattering that my name would even come up, and that people didn't laugh. But it's a decision that has yet to be made. So again, thank you for asking, and you'll be among the first couple thousand to know when I make the decision.
I feel privileged by that, sir. Thank you. Want to talk about mass transit. Finding funding for mass transit has become a bit of a hot topic in New Jersey politics recently. New Jersey Transit is raising fares by 15%. Governor Murphy is proposing to tax companies that make over $10 million to further fund New Jersey Transit. And the state's Transportation Trust Fund, the TTF, as you just mentioned, was just reauthorized for the next 5 years. In this part of the state, people joke that we wish we had some mass transit about which we could argue for funding. And one of the projects that has generated significant enthusiasm is for a light rail line to connect Glassboro, where we sit today, and Camden. My question to you, or the question that came up, do you see the Camden-Glassboro light rail line ever being a priority for the legislators who don't live in southern New Jersey?
Well, I think, look, that is it's a challenge for folks who don't live in a region, just as my colleagues from the southern delegation have an obligation to the people that they have been elected by to make sure that the things that are important to them come to their district. And so I think there will always be a tug in terms of where that funding goes. But the truth of the matter is you do feel the enormity of the position when you do come to realize you represent all 9.3 million people in the state of New Jersey. And so what matters in South Jersey matters. Matters to those of us from Middlesex and those of us from Bergen and Hudson and other places. So do I think there'll be a time when that's a priority, or that where people from other parts of the state will consider it to be an important investment? I think there will. I think there can be. I think there will always be competing choices. The Bergen, Hudson light rail folks are looking for money on a constant basis too. I think we have to straighten out the transit funding first and foremost before we get there. I mean, so much of the state's economy is dependent upon the ability to get people into New York. Now that's changing as people's work patterns change. So as that continues to evolve, then I think other opportunities will probably open up.
I want to talk about tax credit programs for large companies, because we had a couple questions about the efficacy of the state's tax credit programs that are used to ensure companies don't leave New Jersey or to bring large companies here. In fact, just a few years ago, the state was offering about $5 billion in tax incentives to try and get Amazon to establish their East Coast headquarters here in the Garden State. These kinds of programs are not without critics, as you well know. They usually argue that they find it silly to give million-dollar tax breaks to million-dollar companies, or in the case of Amazon, billion-dollar companies. Where do you come down on this debate?
Well, I've supported the incentive program that we had passed back in, I guess it was 2020, and the films tax credit. I think that it's always a balancing act that we have to make. We do that in virtually everything we do in the legislature. And so it is more than just a tax credit. If it was purely a tax credit for a company, I don't know that there would be as much support. But there's an awful lot of things that go along with that. You know, those tax credits often bring jobs or keep jobs. Those tax credits help fund the businesses that surround the place where the facility is being built and the people who are going to work there. It is, we have to make sure you get that right. And that's why it's important to have programs that understand what really need to speak to the need of the people in New Jersey. So do I support them? Yes. Do they need to be a good deal for the state of New Jersey? Yes. You know, they have to help people beyond the scope of the company. You know, it's not about the company in and of itself. I mean, we're also in competition. Let's not ignore that fact, right? With New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. All those places are in competition to get some of those same facilities. Now, I think we're special, unique, and they're like sort of like my grandkids, amazing, perfect, wonderful, and that's where everybody ought to come. But not everybody thinks that way. And there is, we are not noted as being a low tax state, so we have to overcome that. But we want to be in the business of attracting business because it does mean good things for the economy.
We have a few more minutes. Want to try and get a full hour of you being up here, so thank you. We had this question, continues to come up throughout the year. Why are you a Democrat?
Because my mother told me I was. No, I mean that. So I was 10 years old, and I was watching the Nixon-Humphrey election night returns. Now, so now you know how old I am. This is 1968. I was 10. So I'm watching it with my mom. My dad died when I was a little boy. I was 4 years old when my dad died, and my mom was interested in politics. She wasn't really involved in politics. Back in those days, not everybody had a car, and so she volunteered for the Democratic Party and would drive people to the polls if they called. So we're up, and it would seem like really late, and it wasn't a very close election. And then we were watching, and I asked her who we wanted to win. And she said, we want the Democrat to win. And I said, why? And she said, because he cares about people like us. And that was as understandable to her 10-year-old son as it is profound to her 66-year-old son now. I've never found that to be untrue. It's why I care about so many of the things that I care about. Because I care about people like that little kid on the couch with his mother.
Thank you for sharing that. Want to just bring up another issue that came up in a couple questions about offshore wind. Pollsters tell us that the plan to develop offshore wind as a renewable energy source, which you referenced in your opening remarks, at one time this enjoyed broad bipartisan support. It has now devolved into a somewhat bitter partisan battle. What's your perspective on this controversy, and will New Jersey continue to make that kind of commitment?
Well, I think it's critically important that we continue to look for alternative sources of energy, first and foremost, and that's where we should start. I think we should recognize that we have invested heavily in that process, and when we went into it, no one should have believed that it was going to be particularly inexpensive to be able to accomplish that. We're talking about a whole seismic shift in how we went about providing power. There have been benefits outside of the winds itself. In Paulsboro, they've built a port, which will make us the hub of wind energy up and down the East Coast, I believe. That's been supported by the wind company energies. I think it's good for the environment. I think it's good for people. I think we need to make sure that we're doing a few things. One of the things is probably particularly true of down here, and I know it is in a place like Long Beach Island, for example. We have to make sure that we don't. We have to be mindful of protecting the Jersey Shore. Right, it is our number one tourist attraction. Is by orders of magnitude our greatest natural resource, and some of those windmills are close. There's one that's about 8 or 9 miles off the coast of Long Beach Island. Some of them are, I guess, the one off Atlantic City is about 15 miles because they agreed to do it, but now that Ørsted has pulled out. So I think we should continue to invest in the program. We need to make sure that we're working towards that goal. Now, I think we need to be mindful of making sure that we get a good deal. It's always, attracting businesses and moving forward on challenging things like wind energy have to be predicated upon making sure that it makes sense on more than one level. It makes sense conceptually. Does it make sense financially? It has to do both. But overall, it has to get done. We have to find other ways of providing energy for the people of New Jersey. Now, how we go about doing that and how we go about funding that, well, we'll have to work through that. But I think that we'll continue to invest in the wind energy as we move forward.
Final two questions here. Running for office seems daunting for most young people. It's endless negativity, unseemly compromises that you've got to make. So, ask you as an experienced elected official, why should young people look to run for political office?
Because they have an incredible opportunity to make a difference in their community and in their state and in their world. It affords you the opportunity to do something that other things don't allow to do. You get to, he asked me one of the things that was the best part about my job. But it's true of I started off, I was on the Board of Education in South Amboy. I was on the municipal council. South Amboy is a tiny town, about 10,000 people now, probably, 8,500 people when I was running back then. And it's still the same thing. You get to matter about things that are important. And I think for anybody who is inclined to run, that's what they want to do. Everybody who runs wants to make a difference in their community, and I say that without partisan stripes. I know I've been pretty partisan here, but the truth of the matter is that everybody wants to get involved in their community, see that as their way of making a difference. Now, I think you can make differences another way. You don't have to hold elected office to make a profound impact on your community or on the world, but you can. And so, if you have if you want to make that difference and you want to run, you can do it. Now, it is not a parlor game. People play for keeps. It is sometimes hard. Compromise is not always unseemly. Compromise is a way to get things done. Don't do unseemly things. Don't compromise, as I said at the end, don't compromise your core principles. But understand that getting something done really matters. And by the way, there's no corner on good ideas. And by the way, people who don't agree with you aren't necessarily wrong. They may just have a different idea or a different way of looking at it. So if you have that sort of skill set that you're able to meet with people, try to understand what they want, recognize what's important, and you think you're ready for a run, by all means, go do it. By the way, I'll also tell you this. Winning is the most viscerally exciting thing. The first election I ran off the line. Well, I first ran for the Board of Ed. I ran off the line, by the way, when I was running for the city council in South Amboy for the first time. and people didn't think we were going to win. My running mate and I, and we did. And we worked really, really hard. We didn't have any money. We knocked on doors. We printed our own flyers. It's the way most people start their campaigns, by the way. Most campaigns don't start off well funded with, advisors and print media and all that kind of stuff. They start off with somebody knocking on a door, and an idea, and a commitment. And when we won, it was the most. I played some sports in high school. I stunk at all of them. It was the most viscerally exciting thing that happened. Not the most profound. Getting married, having kids is more profound. But it's like winning a game. Because somebody wins and somebody loses. And it's intensely personal because your name is on that ballot. This is a referendum on you. No matter how else you want to say. We all talk in the we term. We need to do this and we accomplish that. It's kind of nonsense. It's your name on the ballot. You win or you lose. And so you have to be ready for that. And you have to be willing to risk losing. But the opportunity it offers to actually stand in front of people and to lead, that's what you get if you get elected. You get a chance to lead. Is really something special.
Our final traditional question that we ask everybody who stood in where you were standing is
I thought this was about asking people if they're going to run for governor.
We can keep asking that one. So what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were their age, when you were the age of our students?
Ooh, that's a good question.
What do you know now that you wish you knew back then?
I wish I had a wonderful, pithy answer for that. I guess I wish I knew how many opportunities you have to succeed. Life has its own course. It gives you opportunities more than I could imagine. When I started off in college, I wanted to be a sportscaster. I lost faith in myself. I thought you had to have a deeper, better voice than I had. Whatever. So I went to law school. I was gonna go save the world. The first job I applied for was a fellowship in Appalachia. I didn't get it. When I was your age, I thought those things were really huge setbacks. The truth of the matter is the next opportunity came. I got appointed to the Board of Education. The next opportunity came, and I decided to run off the line for the city council. The next opportunity came, and then I got married, and I had kids. And I had always thought about running for the assembly. And I'll tell you a story in a second. But I don't think I understood when I was 18 how many chances I was going to get at getting something, at doing something. Maybe it was a good thing because I might have been lackadaisical. But the truth of the matter is it would have made some of the pressure that I felt back then to be a lot easier. I'll give you one other tip. My Christmas card story. So I got elected to the Board of Education. I got elected to the city council, and I always thought I would want to run up. Life takes its own way. I started sending Christmas cards to the county committee people. That's the people who actually make the line in addition to the folks, because I lived in that system. We're talking about 1986. When I say I meant my wife, who's the greatest partner anybody could ever have, sent Christmas cards to all 330 of them. And we did that every year. And then I had a couple of kids, and I decided I needed to spend more time being a father. And because it's on a local level, it's really when you can't go out for a quart of milk without somebody stopping to talk about something. And so I left the city council I had gotten reelected, and then I left to coach Little League and drove my kids to the Cub Scouts and We never made Boy Scouts because we're a great indoor kind of family. Like the Coughlin idea of roughing it is that there's no room service at the hotel. Mm-hmm. But so I left. But Tish, my wife, never stopped sending those Christmas cards to me. And 17 years go by, and now I'm going to run. And it happens in this way. Somebody I knew was a dear friend, had won the nomination in the primary, was going to run for the assembly, and for one reason or another decided not to run. And he suggested that I run. And I was a judge at the time. I was a municipal court judge. Now, you can't be in two branches of government at the same time. You can't campaign for elected office as a judge. So my leap of faith was that I had to give up being a judge. I had to resign being a judge in order to run for the assembly. I did, and the selection process was 8 days later. So I could have had an 8-day career as a politician. But my wife had been sending those Christmas cards all those years. So the other person that was running against me, he was a Superior Court judge. He was a full-time judge, and he retired. They had let him believe that he was going to win. That was a mistake. Always be able to count the room. So he would call somebody up and say, you know, John, this is Judge so-and-so, and I'm running for the assembly, and I appreciate your support. Well, John had been getting Christmas cards from me for 17 years. My conversation went, hey, Jay, it's Craig. I'm running for the assembly. Can I count on your support? Sure, Craig. And it was done. Because this isn't, if you want to be involved in politics, it's not a hobby. It's not a job. It's a way of life. It has colored decisions in our family every year since I started being in the city council. So work hard at it. Send Christmas cards or whatever kind of birthday cards, whatever it is. Stay in touch. And so I forget what my point was. But.
On that note, okay, thank you. I want to thank the speaker. We have for you, sir, just so you should see, your very own, be the first one on your block, with a RIPAC t-shirt thing, all very nice. And on the back, after we get this photo, Workforce Development for Democracy, which is what we do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this entire season. We greatly appreciate it. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much. Just wonderful. Thank you so much. That was great.